This is what the aftermath of FML looks like.
Where's the easy button?
Today's episode of In the Cave with Valley Rally Enduro is brought to you by Beta Canada, our number one choice when it comes to riding the best enduro bikes on the market today. Go to betacanada.net or your local Beta dealer to check out the latest 2022 models. Ride, race, live, Beta. It's all good in the woods. This episode is also brought to you by Sunny Hill Resort, located on the shores of beautiful Bark Lake in Barry's Bay, Ontario. Family-oriented and moto-friendly, Sunny Hill is Ontario's number one vacation destination and boasts a full range of great amenities such as fully equipped waterfront cottages, full-service campsites, and year-round ride-in, ride-out access for dirt bikes, motorcycles, and snowmobiles. Go to sunnyhillresort.com for full pricing and availability. This episode is also brought to you by Langs Off-Road. If you are at all into enduro or trials riding here in Ontario, then you are no doubt familiar with Langs Off-Road. They are one of, if not the only, dedicated enduro and trial shop in the province, and they know their stuff. If you are in the Southern Ontario region and are an enduro or trials enthusiast like us, then you would be doing yourself a disservice by not checking out Langs Off-Road for your moto needs. Darrin, good to see you.
John, good to see you too, buddy. Welcome to my shop here. First of all, it's kind of neat to see this set up outside of the cave.
Yeah, man, we're mobile this week.
Yeah, we're mobile.
Yeah, very cool.
I like it a lot and really happy to have you guys here.
Right on. So you are fresh, or sort of fresh. We got a little recovery time, but fresh off the Baja 1000, which is why we're here. And
It's a big one.
It's a big one. But I'm wondering, as a first step for maybe folks who aren't so familiar with what Baja 1000 is, or how much of a I don't know, accomplishment it was. Maybe you can give us a little background on Baja and maybe explain the race.
Sure thing. First of all, the Baja 1000 is like the longest continuous desert race basically going in the world, meaning you're not stopping for the night, you're not setting up camp, and then continuing the next morning. It's all in one go. So that's what makes the Baja 1000 a little unique to, many other desert type races, like even Dakar or whatever, right? It's continuous. You start and you don't stop again until you finish the race. So there is a series down there in Baja, and it's Score International is kind of like the governing company or body, and they have the Baja 250, the Baja 400, the Baja 500, and the Baja 1000. So the Baja 1000 is basically it's like the chord of the Ontario series, right? It's like the
pinnacle.
The pinnacle, the final, and that's where a lot of teams can kind of make or break their season. And it's also obviously, just from a mileage standpoint, it's the hardest one because it's the longest distance. Which offers up, a lot of challenges, obviously. Now, my sort of ties to Baja go way back to like when I was a 14-year-old. My aunt, my mom's sister, basically moved down there to Cabo San Lucas area. And my aunt was like this kind of free spirit type. I grew up with like a nurse mom and a cop dad, pretty straight-laced sort of middle-class family in the suburb. And my aunt was like this free spirit who was always traveling. She was in Europe, and my Aunt Sherry, I'm going to shout out Aunt Sherry, who's passed away, but have her to thank
God
for a lot of this. This because this is where it starts. And so she moved down there. So my family started going down to see her in San Jose del Cabo, where you guys have been, John and Jason Milne here. And so we would go down there for like Christmas time, when I was like 14, and me and my sister be down there, and it's like, you're out in the desert. It's just so not Canada, it's like the opposite end of the spectrum, right? So personally, I was just like enthralled with it, I was just instantly in love with the place. and we continued, to go down there. And then, we'd be going out to my aunt's friend's place, down the East Cape Road, which Jason's been down.
Yep.
Really, a solar powered place, and you'd be out in the middle of nowhere on the ocean, and then, I'd see these buggies and Volkswagen Beetles, or I'd see like these bikes going by, XR 400s or whatever, and I'd just be like, basically losing my mind, right? You can bike down here, these guys are
anywhere.
Yeah,
anywhere
exactly.
there.
Yeah, and I was just a teen at the time, but kind of simultaneously back home here, you started seeing the Baja thing kind of almost substituting for rad. You know what I mean? They were starting to put it on the Ford F-150, 1988 Baja edition. You know what I mean? Like
Yep.
the name Baja was kind of starting to become synonymous with cool, or just something that people were using, in place of rad sort of thing. Is the only thing I can come up with right now. But so with the bike thing, and then I used to be like a subscriber to like Dirt Wheels magazine or Dirt Bike magazine. I'd start seeing race summaries and recaps and articles, and so back then there was 3-wheelers involved, and it was way more rugged and different types of machines sort of thing. But that's what I was into. I was kind of into like 3 and 4-wheelers back then, but dirt bikes as well. Buddies, we had everything and whatever you could afford or get your hands on. But that's kind of where my obsession with Baja began. And then eventually my aunt unfortunately passed away of cancer, and she left the place to my parents, which was great. And we continued going down there. They'd be down there all winter. When I was 19, me and my buddy Ian, it was like we're fresh out of high school. I was like, what are we going to do? Well, I just bought this 1986 Chevrolet Celebrity that, is in decent shape. Why don't we drive it down to Baja?
Of course.
Yeah, exactly. We did, we don't have jobs, but we got like $800 each or some minimal amount, to get us there. So
More than enough.
Exactly.
Gas
so
was cheap.
We drove from Ottawa to Baja and spent like a month down there, and then up to Banff, and just did this trip. We neither one of us was in university or working any serious job that we couldn't take off for a few months, and so that kind of continued it. And then eventually, about 6 years ago, unfortunately, my parents both passed away, and so our little condo down there that my aunt started out in and then passed to my parents. Now, me and my sister kind of landed in our laps, and it was like, what are we gonna do now? And I was like, well, let's rent it, use it and enjoy it. We both love the place so dearly. And she's like, okay, well, my dad had this 4Runner when he passed away. And she's like, well, I guess we'll sell that and like split the proceeds from that. And I'm like, no, we're not selling that.
No.
That's a perfect Baja machine right there.
Yep.
So basically I said, I'll buy you out. And she's like, no, it makes sense. Let's get it down there. So I managed to convince basically 3 other buddies to commit dirt bikes to drive down there in a trailer. We were going to do the Baja like rip to the tip style, from Ensenada all the way to Cabo, and then and that over 10 days, and then leave the whole setup down there, right? And one or two of them were really on the fence. My buddy Ian was in right away, kind of thing, because he'd been down there and loved it. But, Matt, big time was like, oh, I don't know if I can do that. No, I'm out. And then when he saw that I had bought the trailer and was this was getting serious, he called me back. He's like, okay, I'm in. I don't want to miss this, So that got some bikes down there and our setup down there. And, we all our old gear that we maybe just used last year, we brought it down at the time in the trailer, because that was like our one shot to drive down there. And then after that, we'd be flying in, kind of thing. So over the past 5-6 years, we've been flying in once, twice a season, and, one day setting the bikes up because they've been sitting, and then 5 to 7 days driving from town to town, or riding from town to town on the bikes, ripping through the desert, loving life, roll into, town X, find a spot, to stay, and then hit the margs,
And that's what started you. That was your bug for Baja.
Yeah, that was exactly. So I used, exactly. That got us established down there.
Yep.
and that got me a bike down there kind of thing. And then, I'd already been dreaming of the Baja 1000, like I said, since I was first heard, Baja and 1000 put together in a sentence kind of thing. And so now it's like I got a bike down there, and I've been riding down there, and I kind of getting to know the terrain. It's time to sort of make this happen. And so, I'd be whispering, I'd only really bring it up maybe with some close friends after a bunch of beers. It's not something you just like talk out loud about. It's like, because it's such a grand thing, and I'm not really a racer, right? So, after like 6 or a dozen beers, it'd be like, oh,
I'm doing it.
Yeah,
it's a great idea.
I'm like, yeah, I'm gonna do the Baja 1000, and it'd kind of be like, yeah, whatever, ride out.
Yeah,
yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Anyways, there was definitely like some key people that were really like, you should do it, and I think you're there, at a time and in your life and your riding capability that you can pull this off. So,
So obviously the stars lined up for you this year. And so once that happened, I guess, it was go time. It's like we've kind of established that it's a pretty big endeavor, but what is it that makes getting to Baja so tough? Like, I mean, let's talk about some of the hurdles that you had to face just to get to the start line.
For sure. I mean, logistics are a big deal, right? Because almost everybody that's racing and riding down there regularly, they're driving. They live in the States. They're in the southern states at that. Most of them. So it's load up their truck with everything they need and just drive down there, right? And even if it's 20, 30, hours, kind of for them, it's like 40 to 60 for us, depending on where. If you're going all the way to Cabo, for me, that's like 60-hour drive basically. So getting the stuff that you need down there is a big hurdle, first of all. So over the years of going down and doing those little trips, I'd bring a pair of boots or oil filters or oil, or you're trying to stockpile stuff down there. But my bike had been in the tip, where our condo is, for years. But my buddy Tim, basically 2 years ago said, hey, I'm thinking about riding up north a bit, and I'll get JC, who's he's our main like go-to guy down there, to pick up the bikes and bring them up north, and then we can fly in down there and see some more north, which I hadn't barely touched since we drove through it on our original trip. So I was like, yeah, let's do that. That sounds great. So got the bike up north. So now here's another step, because that's like 30-hour drive, like the Baja, just, driving the highway kind of thing, right?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think people understand how big or how long Baja is. Like from top to bottom, like how many kilometers is that?
Well, it's like 1,000 miles, like kind of as the crow flies, more or less, right? So you're not going as the crow flies at all. You're going zigzag back and forth. That's the way.
Especially on the race.
Yeah,
especially
on the race. But even the highways, like just to drive in a car, it takes,
Like it's essentially the same length as the western coast of the United States.
Yeah, exactly.
It might even be a bit longer.
Yeah, it's definitely far. So yeah, anyways, now my bike is up north, and that's kind of checked off. But I wanted to do the Peninsula Run if I could, and for people that aren't familiar with the event itself, every second year it has traditionally been a Peninsula Run, and then the other years it was basically a loop up north, Ensenada, and then back around San Felipe, like down one coast, across and up the other, and then through the mountains and back to Ensenada. And that run is like typically 800 and some miles kind of thing. And it has its own difficulties that the Peninsula Run doesn't, and of course it's different set of tracks kind of thing. But, my dream was to do the Peninsula Run because, I'd end up down there. I could fly Kim or the girls in and have a vacation after, and it's just that's the dream for me, is just end to end, right?
Was that part of what your drive was, you think, is knowing that your wife was at the end of the peninsula?
Yeah, that
Really?
definitely helped. No,
Yeah, for
honestly,
sure.
absolutely. And we decided, we hadn't had a vacation away from the kids since they were born, so her mother got on board to come here and stay at our house and watch the kids. So she just flew in, and just how it worked with airline tickets and everything. She was in the air basically when I left the start line, got into our condo and like locked into Wi-Fi right away, and was
Yep.
kind of knew what was going on. And Tim, my buddy Tim Led, obviously was updating her and this and that. But yeah, for sure. And that vacation at the end, we had a week, on our own without the kids at the
Sweet.
condo, in
Nice.
San Jose. So that was huge for recovery and everything.
Yep.
But yeah, with it being the Peninsula run and just like you say, the stars were aligning. Like the COVID was starting to let go a bit, just coincidentally.
How much of a factor was that in both the race and preparing for it? Like, was that like a total pain in the ass for the organizers? Or
Yeah, for sure. Like they right down to 2 days before the start, they announced that they weren't going to let the general public around the start line, which it's a huge thing for Ensenada. Like the businesses shut down, everybody's off work, and they're just flooding the scene and getting autographs, and that's the culture down there. It's huge. So meanwhile, in the south, COVID had really led up, so the finish line was going to be open to the public. They announced, but the start line wasn't. So it was definitely a thing. And when we were north pre-riding and everything, it's even more so than here. They're everybody's wearing masks, and every business you go into, they have a little temperature teller, that you have to put your forehead to or whatever. And I was pretty impressed how on it they were down there. But it was definitely a big thing in Ensenada while we're there. So that definitely affected it a bit. Yeah.
Cool. So you've basically at this point figured out how you're going to pay for this, how you're going to get there logistically. So what happened next to get you to the finish line?
Well, the plan...
Or not the finish line, but the start line.
Yeah. Well, the plan was to... this thing goes on like, November 18th. So it was like, let's get me conditioned. I'd obviously been in a bit of a regime working out for the year leading up to this, but you want to be breathing the dust, you want to be riding whoops, you want to be hitting some silt beds and, get accustomed to and lay of the land. You want to be getting hot, in desert conditions and then getting cold.
Yeah, because the riding there is probably vastly different than it is here for the most part.
Absolutely. It's desert riding, right? Which is completely different. It obviously has its similarities, but yeah. So the plan was to do like a pre-ride, and other racers, buggies, trucks, side by sides. They're a team of 4 or 5, and they're riding their own section of the race, so they know it, off by heart kind of thing. That's how it's done. And so the teams are down there for weeks. They're riding their section over and over, which would be like 200 or 300 miles.
Is that like cheating?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it beats up the course really bad.
Yeah, I
first
bet
of
it
all.
does.
But for me as an Ironman, I was like, I'm not going to do that because the course is beat up and it's really hard on the body. So I laid out a set of tracks of like really amazing single track, and some of the best stuff you can ride down there. And we did that over like 9 days. We got down there, got the bikes going over a day or two, and then did like a 9-day ride, me and Tim Lett and Keith Billings. And that was amazing. First of all, that's like a dream trip on its own, right? So
Yeah.
we did that, and that's where you had pictures of me with cactus sticking out of my arm or whatever.
Every day.
Every day.
Yeah. Oh man, you can't cheat the corners down there. I'm telling you, it's nasty. Like those things are crazy, and it's like Velcro trying to pull it out of your skin. Like, just, like even makes a
Needle nose
noise.
pliers, right?
Yeah, needle nose pliers, or I'd get a wrench and just like get behind it
Flick
and
it
like,
off.
oh yeah, because if you touch it with your, it's just
Stuck to your
sticks to
hand.
everything.
Stuck to your other
it's like a
hand.
giant burr. Yeah.
Yeah.
So so that 9-day ride was amazing, and we do like, we're doing like 120 or so miles a day, 180, 200K, and that's with single track and some more technical stuff. And like we're wiped, at the end of those days, right? This is, wow,
Yeah.
that was a beat down, and I'm thinking in my head like, well, that's like 10% or so of what what I have to ride all in one go. And simultaneously, on the pre-ride, you're running into other race teams, you're running into locals, you're running into everybody, and they want to know how you're going to be involved in this. I had the numbers on my bike and everything, and you run into someone and you say, "Oh, I'm in the Ironman class, I'm Ironmanning it," and they're just like, you know, are you?
They give you the look?
Oh, the look
you
is just like,
insane?
yeah, are you? And a lot of them are racers, right? And they're responsible for 200 or 300 miles, and they know that is gonna kick their asses like hardcore.
Yeah.
So, as someone who's new into this, the constant of, are you insane? Do you know what you're getting into? This is crazy. In front of them, I'd be like, oh yeah, yeah, for sure, I got this. But internally, you're constantly questioning yourself. Like, am I ready for this? Like, this is a crazy endeavor, and if the locals and everybody that's in this world are calling it crazy, as me, like a Canadian guy from the outside, what are my chances, really?
Yeah.
Well, I've had similar thoughts when we do big rides, and because I've yet to complete like the Daker, which is like a 22-hour event, right? Mm-hmm. So it's basically time-wise, anyways, it's not like pretty much half of what you had to do. Mm-hmm. But I'm sitting there going, like, after a big ride, I go, like, let's say it's 150K of hard trail, and we're smashed.
Yep.
And I'm like, well, the average mileage for gold class on Daker is about 550K.
Yeah.
I'm like, I basically have to turn around, go back and do this like 4 more times.
Yep.
Could I do that? I'm like, oh, God damn.
It's a mental game.
I
at
know,
that
and
point.
those sort of math equations are what I'm doing in my head the whole time, right? So leading up to the start, we finished that 9-day ride, and we laid out like 4 days in between the pre-ride and the actual race. So that's like prepping bikes. And my bike was going to be the backup, and then my buddy Tim Lett, who we all know, and great dude, he offered up his 501 to me to do the race, and that's because his suspension's all done, and he's got the steering stabilizer, comfy seat, and knowing the cost of what all this is, he's like, why don't you just use my bike? Then that would save me, having to add all those parts to my 500. Yeah, so that was fantastic. Thank you very much, Tim Lett.
So did you have your 5 kind of as a backup in case?
Exactly.
Yeah.
So we put fresh tires and mousses on my 500, and then just focused on replacing every part that could possibly go wrong on his bike, including like the fuel pump.
So is that legal? Like, can you just swap out vehicles like with bikes?
No.
Oh, okay.
Not during the race.
No, you have to finish on the bike that you started on.
So like if the bike shit the bed halfway through, you couldn't just jump on your 500 and keep going.
No, it could peel parts off it, and both bikes have common parts, like the whole sort of wheels setup, and there's a million parts that are shared, but the engine, they mark it with paint and like the tech inspection and contingency and stuff like that. Yeah, so so they know if you've swapped out the motor in the end, kind of thing. So yeah, you have to finish on the bike you started on. So it was a big job to go over the bike and make sure.
Yeah, I bet.
Imagine doing like 1,000 miles and then the bike quits because the fuel pump, or one of these common sort of issues with these bikes. So we changed out every single thing that was known to let go on these bikes.
So did you guys have anybody to help you out with, kind of like someone who's done it before, who and is like a really savvy guy when it comes to bike?
Absolutely,
bike mechanics.
For sure. But like Mike from Taco Moto, which is a company out of Nevada.
Yeah.
That guy is like a 501 and 500, 350 specialist kind of thing, and he sells a lot of unique parts. So leaning on him a lot for information, but also my buddy Garrett, who did the Ironman in 2019.
Okay.
That's the guy who kind of I reached out to. I watched him. I saw him on Facebook in one of the groups, saying he's going to do it, and he's not a racer. He's just like an everyday man, like us kind of thing. And I latched on to him in 2019 and focused on his run to see what the probability of me being able to do it was. And so I watched him on following him on the app throughout the race and his lead up, all his prep. He was posting videos and that sort of thing. And he finished. So when he was done, I reached out to Garrett and said, hey, when you get back to South Dakota and you settle in, I'd love to give you a call and ask you some questions. And I said this at the finish line, but yeah, the phone rang in my hand. He's like, oh, what do you want to know? He's just like a super awesome dude. So
wow.
We became friends. Yeah. And over the 2 years leading up to me doing it, he's constantly inputting on what kind of setup, we want
Right.
with the bike and this and that, just little hints and tricks, right?
Cool.
Yeah.
So you've got, you're doing your training rides, you're dialing the bike in. Any big surprises in between those training rides and getting to the start line? Any dramas?
Yeah, the 501 gave up its clutch, on the second last day or so of our pre-ride. So,
Just before.
yeah, we're in this like
Perfect time.
Oh
Perfect timing.
man, this was like the biggest stressor for me for sure. Because as you guys know, finding parts is near impossible. But we're in Bay of LA, riding this sort of mountainous, hill climby, terrible condition sort of area. And the 501 had been giving Tim some clutch issues. It was creeping and just acting funny, hard to find neutral, So we were concerned, and we opened it up and had a look a couple times, and we had the mechanic that had been working on it, who's a local, Baja guy there, come over and have a look, and we noticed that he put like these little washers and shims in here and there when we had it open, and he was looking at it, and he adjusted a few things, and we went ahead on our pre-ride, and it was just acting funny kind of thing. It was working, but like I said, creeping and showing. So simultaneously, I'm asking Mike from Takamoto, here's some symptoms, and he's saying, check this, check that. And ultimately, through this mountain climby track outside of Bay of LA, the clutch gave up, and basically Tim overheated it on this hill climb, and it burnt up basically, and we barely got back to Bay of LA before it was like completely gone, right? So that was
Like, was it just the plates who got smoked, or
it was,
Yeah.
but there was a underlying cause which we knew because it was acting, funny,
okay.
and it had been shimmed here and there. We could see,
So what was ultimately causing the
Well,
premature wear?
ultimately the mechanic that had worked on it left out a washer that lives behind the hub, in between the hub and the basket. And if you watch videos on YouTube and stuff, it says, when you separate these two, watch for this washer because it might stick to the basket and drop off,
Right.
with
And
oil
that's
or
what
whatever.
happened.
And that's and from the start, Keith Billings was like, I bet you that washer's missing, and we were like, yeah, I don't think so. And that's what it ended up being.
Got to listen to Keith more often.
Yeah. So days before the race, this thing was still smoked, and we had some parts on the way. We got a clutch pack from.
Speaking of Gareth, he just liked the video, so he's watching.
Right on.
He's following along.
Right on. So days before the actual race, we got a clutch pack, from Mike from Takamoto, and it took a lot of work to get it down Ensenada for us quickly. And meanwhile, Tim had rented a bike from Poncho, a 501. Poncho's like a guy down there that rents bikes and does logistics and this and that.
Yeah, what's his company's name?
DS Pro.
DS Pro. Yeah.
Yeah. Anyways, great guy.
Anybody looking for a Baja ride?
Yeah, exactly. Great guy, and he helps us out. And so he came to and met us and dropped off a bike for Tim to ride in the meantime, and we jammed Tim's bike in the support van. But instantly that's that's the race bike, and it has, the clutch is fried.
You need that bike.
I need that bike, and I needed to have a good clutch. So we're finishing the ride, and simultaneously, mad texting with people to try to get parts. And Mike from Takamoto was like stripping parts out of bikes that he had like at his shop because he can't get the parts, and he certainly couldn't get them in a day or two. So he's sending them down, and we're finishing the ride. So once we got back, and we got this clutch apart and noticed, that washer was we noticed it was gone. It was like, what are we gonna do now? We have to wait for these parts and stuff. So I basically opened up some microfiches of parts manuals for my bike, my 2013 500, and Tim's 2017 501, and noticed that the clutch parts were the same, and I didn't know.
God bless KTM for that.
Oh, between the two, and like there's 4 years difference in the model range too, right? Mm-hmm. And sure enough, it's the exact same clutch. And so, that evening I was like, hey, tomorrow morning, our focus is to pull mine apart and systematically, put it back together in Tim's bike, because mine worked perfectly and mine was in great shape. I knew that. So that's what we did. And we had some friends that came down, Jeff Pilon and his buddy RJ and Tim. They were down there on their 790s. They came down to ride and check out the scene and support me.
Does Jeff just travel around with a 7.9? Like he just packs it in a
He is
suitcase or
everywhere.
what?
Yeah.
He is everywhere. I went on a walk the
man.
other day on not Sunny Hill Road, Curtis Road next to Sunny Hill Resort.
He's there.
No, he wasn't, but I ran into a guy that lives down there. And he's like, oh, I have a friend. I guess he stayed at Sunny Hill a few times this year. I said, oh, what's his name? Oh, Jeff Pilon. I'm like, does that guy not know
man.
everybody? Used to work with him.
Yeah.
So, yeah,
Jeff's
he's
an
everywhere.
amazing guy.
Yeah, he
you know.
is. Yeah.
Shout out to Jeff.
Yeah.
And him and the guys were there at the time when that day that we were doing the clutch. And the one guy, Tim, was ill. He had like stomach issues, so he went and laid down. But Jeff and RJ, you know, they're like, you know, we know these bikes. Let us sort of take over here. And we're like, sure. You know, I wasn't arguing.
Sure.
And RJ like systematically took my clutch apart, you know, labeling pieces and making sure that it went into Tim's bike perfectly.
Well, and those guys are like, they design auto parts
Exactly.
like for a living.
Yeah,
so they
do
kind of know
tooling,
what they're talking
tooling
about.
and stuff like that. Yeah, exactly. So I was just like sat back and worked on my little project or whatever it was, like doing the fuel pump or whatever, and let them take control of the clutch situation. And it came out perfectly. And we got
Apparently.
yeah, the one part or the one package we did get from Mike in time was a brand new Recluse like clutch pack, like just the plates. So we were able to reassemble the whole thing with using my parts and then plus that brand new clutch pack, and it, you know, worked out perfectly. And, you know, I was just like, oh, you know, what a relief. Like, you know, there's enough going on when something like this is coming up in your head. Never mind the race bike is like incapacitated, right?
At the moment, it was probably the worst thing in the world. But thinking back, that's part of the journey
That's
to
it.
getting there.
That's it. And anytime something happened is like, you know, I'd have to tell myself there's going to be trials and tribulations with this, right?
For sure.
Yeah.
So, yeah. So once that was checked off, it was like, okay, now I can worry about like hydration and that sort of thing. And
Well, speaking of hydration, so one of the questions, so I put out a video right before we sat down on Instagram and asked folks if they had questions for you regarding your endeavor for Baja 1000. So the first one here, let's pull it up because it has to do with exactly what you're talking about here. Rose Latang.
yes,
Who we
yes,
know.
Rose. Hi, Rose.
Shout out to Rose.
Hey, Rose.
She would love to know what sort of strategy you used for like fuel and hydration.
Yeah, okay. I mean, this is an interesting part of it for sure for an event like this because I've been told by Garrett and a few others like, hey, there's this company that's at the contingency and start area that you'll see in a trailer called Finish Line Hydration.
Oh, nice.
And you know you want to get their product, which is an IV. You know.
No way.
Yeah. Oh yeah. So.
So they strap you up with an IV?
Oh yeah. So you get in the trailer.
So it's like pre-hydrate?
Yes. So
Yeah.
this is the day before the race. So you go
Okay.
through tech inspection, and they hand you their menu here, which I have in
Interesting.
front of us here, and it's not cheap. $175 US for the podium is what this one's called.
Well, how deep are you in at this point? 175 bucks US.
That's exactly it. It's like, that's what the visa is for, right? So,
You
anyways,
spend more than that on beer sometimes. in a
totally,
night, so it's
totally.
fine.
So laid down for that, no problem, you know,
Yeah.
sure. And others recommended it. So it's like a yellowy liquid, and it looks like it's in a Camelback bag. You know, it's an IV bag, but it's
In Mexico.
oh yeah, in
Yeah,
It's
Mexico.
like some guy's pee.
Yeah, could be no.
Full of Gatorade.
So I'm just gonna grab this. Hang on.
Yeah.
So yeah, the one I went for is the most expensive, but it's loaded with glutathione, L-carnitine, glycine, magnesium, vitamin C, vitamin B, B12, zinc, and taurine. So you sit there for
Mainline and taurine.
yeah. So you sit there for 45 or so minutes while this bag empties into your body, and chat with 5 or 6 other racers that are having the same thing. And it was really neat because there's like a guy from a trophy truck, you know, there's a guy from a side by side, another Ironman was there, and yeah, you walk out, and I didn't feel any different or anything, you know. And I was wondering, you know, will I be peeing like crazy or anything like that? And so that was one thing. But I also, you know, leading up to the actual race, started drinking, you know, heavily like water and
But water, not beer.
Yeah, exactly. I was off beer like for a couple months leading up to the race. First of
Wow,
all,
Wow.
that's probably
That's
the hardest
commitment.
thing you've ever had to do.
I know.
Cheers, Rideout.
Yeah, cheers. As I load another one into my cozy here.
Oh,
Anyways,
he's catching up now, though.
So besides that, I mean, the Camelback is obviously like any other race, but I used BioSteel, and down there they have that like stuff that's meant for feeding, like Pedialyte kind of thing. They're the version down there. It's called Electrolyte or whatever. You got it at Costco, so we had cases of that. So I'd be mixing that like half and half with water, like throughout the race kind of thing. Yeah. So that's that really, just minding, making sure that I'm drinking even if I didn't feel thirsty throughout the race. And there was times where I was like, I suddenly felt dry, like, and like, would consciously know, oh, I haven't had a sip on that thing for a while. And then like maybe suck a third of the Camelback down in one shot, kind of thing, to make up for that. But
Yeah, we've talked about that on some of our other podcasts. I think it was with Sean, actually.
It was, yeah.
Just, it's a fun little game to play when you got to push hard for a long time and keep your body hydrated. And it makes a big difference because if you get dehydrated, you're done.
exactly.
You're finished.
And with the pre-ride and everything too, I'd been really practicing at that, and throughout the season, just making sure I was on top of sucking on the Camelback constantly, kind of thing.
Right on.
Yeah,
So I think it's time to race.
yeah.
So you're
I
on.
just talked
I only
way
came
too
here.
much.
I only came here to hear about the race. Yeah.
So you're getting. It's the day of. Mm-hmm. What's going on? What's going through your head?
Well, the race for me, like my time slot for the start was like 2 a.m., which is crazy, right? So the days leading up, we tried to mess with my sleep so that I'd be well rested at that time. So the day of the race, I went to bed, I think at like 10 a.m., and I was going to try to sleep as long as I could throughout the day. But I ended up sleeping till maybe 2 or something. I got 4 or 5 hours sleep. And but with so much, I was just so jacked and so pumped, and there was, to get that amount, I was happy, kind of thing, right?
Yeah.
And then it's just like I was doing yoga, I was hydrating, just making sure I was eating some bananas and the stuff you do, but just the time was going so slowly, like the buildup has been so big now, and finally, we went over to the shop and got the bike going, and made my way to the start line. And I was the first one there. I'm chronically early for everything. So this was no different, first bike to be there, basically.
What time was that?
Would have been 1:30, 1:15, so come 1:45, more bikes started trickling in. And then the lights are all on and stuff, and they got tunes going. And basically they as the bikes are coming in, they're arranging them in the starting order, which was like a draw. And in Ironman class, I was 4th to leave, which was good for me. There's 13 riders in the class. I thought that's awesome. And the first few are actually there because they qualified. They'd done like they're pros, right? They'd done like the 250, the 400, the 500 throughout the year. And they're like number 1 and number 2 for the championship. And then like kind of the rest of us are just whoever's, right?
Right. So, but there was that guy with the gravelly voice that goes around and he interviews everybody. Mm-hmm. Like there was a bit where you were talking to him before, like it looked like the start line, but it was during the day. So when was that? When did that happen? Was that before you took off, or was that kind of like a day before sort of thing? Yeah,
that was like the tech inspection contingency, which was the day before, couple days before. So you had to make your way in, and they mounted the Stella, tracking device and the unit, and you had to be pre-wired all for that. So we had to install all that. And so I didn't even know that was going to happen, that interview. I just, tech inspect, you go down and, and then all of a sudden you're up on stage and this guy's interviewing you. So I wasn't really prepped up for that, but it worked out okay.
It was cool. It almost like he knew you. Did he?
Oh, he's a great guy.
Okay.
He's like, hey, Darrin.
Yeah, Darrin, it's nice to see you.
No, that's just how they are. Like as you're getting up to the stage, someone comes and asks you like your name, and so they get to pass it to the guy, right?
Oh, okay.
But they're good at their job for sure.
Cool.
Yeah. So the night of the start, it's a lot of waiting again, right? You're there, and there's different classes going ahead of me, kind of thing, like other bike classes and stuff. we're not the first to leave. So you're in this line that's just creeping ahead towards the start line. And in that line, you're sizing up, the class, right? Yeah,
Sure you are.
absolutely.
Yeah.
And
totally take that
all
guy.
the bikes look so dialed, right?
Yeah.
But there's guys with 2 lights, headlights versus I have 1, and just all different setups.
You're like, oh my God, I don't have enough lights.
Yeah.
Yeah, and like wearing a catheter or not, which I was, and was eyeballing other dudes to see what their setup was that way, and noticed that
Look
some
at
of
the
them.
catheter on that guy.
Yeah, exactly.
The big tube.
Yeah. So noticing that other riders don't have that, and I do, and
Well, that's a game changer, man. Like I remember, doing rough math, trying to do like Dacre calculations. Okay, like stopping to pee once every hour. And, like it's not doesn't sound like much, right?
Adds
But
up.
like, how long does it take you to pee? Well, if you really got to go, it might take you a while. Like might take you almost a minute to get it all out.
Oh.
And
for sure.
so it's 22 hours. That's almost half hour you've burned just having a piss. Or even if you take a break to rest for
Absolutely.
5 minutes, an
Absolutely.
hour, we'll add that up over 22 hours.
Yeah.
So you rode for how many hours?
46. It was 45 something.
45.
But I got penalties, and then they added
okay.
45 minutes
Oh,
time
I
for
see.
speeding and this and that.
You.
Yeah.
Aaron
Oh, I was
speeding?
shocked
believe
that
it.
I
Yeah,
got
we're here.
that much penalty, but
But I mean, like, can you imagine if you had to stop like 10 minutes every hour?
that's
you never would've
totally
made
it.
it.
So I talked about that once the race was going, and I was exchanging positions with other Ironmen in my class. I did see like a couple pulling over, to take a whiz, and I'm like, adios, and that's
ya,
the last time I saw those guys. Like, to be honest,
Yeah.
I never saw them again, and then looking at the finish, like a couple of those dudes didn't finish, or whatever, and I did, but.
You're still peeing out there in the desert somewhere.
Exactly. But when you're focused on hydrating so much, like even at the start line, I had to pee like probably 4 times. So I just wander over to the side, like onto the sidewalk, or where there's like a little cactus garden.
As he's walking.
And, yeah, I
he's
was
just like,
I'd be talking with people, talking to other people, and they don't know. I'm just like taking a whiz while
Well,
we're
you got
chatting.
good at it then, apparently.
Yeah, I got really good at it.
you're not having a whiz right now, are you?
Are you still wearing it?
I am. Oh, it's great. It's my new thing. I'm gonna wear one all the time now. So yeah, that was the right decision. That was like a Garrett thing too. Hey, you want to do this? You want to wear the catheter, and it's a condom catheter for the people out there. It's not. I said that to a few people. They're like, "Who inserted it?" Or, it's not that style. It's an over the
cap, put
business
it in.
catheter.
It's
Yeah.
an Audi, not an innie.
That's right.
Exactly. So getting to the start, so it's a long process, and then the cops basically end up, once you see the start countdown, and it's that cool moment, you go around the corner and wait some more, and then we're escorted out in packs out to basically out of town, outside of Ensenada, and then they do the whole thing over again, and that's where your actual time starts and everything.
So how jacked is your heart rate riding on escort with the cops getting ready to go?
Like, to be honest, the buildup was so high, and I just wanted the thing to happen. In the last 2 weeks leading up to it, and there was times, months ahead of the race, that I wouldn't be sleeping at all. I couldn't sleep just thinking about it in every little detail. But when the race actually came, and it was like 2 weeks out, I just wanted it to happen so bad that a weird calm came over me.
Right.
And by that time, and the thing actually started, I was like, I just want to lay my run down here, and so. I was surprisingly calm, and all the pre-work had been done, and all the boxes had been checked, so there was kind of like nothing else to worry about. The clutch was replaced, the IV has been put in me, and
You've done everything you could up until that point. And
that's
the rest
it. The rest is just the riding, and I knew once I started riding, like any ride, even OVR, I can barely sleep the night before. I'm so revved up and excited about it, but as soon as I start riding, all that nervous tension just falls away, and you're in the moment, and you're in the zone,
Right.
So yeah, I got talking with some other Ironman here and there, like while we're kind of waiting for the start, and that helped relax. And then once it started, it was just like, here we go. But one thing I noticed, like right away, we go down some highway, and then it hangs a left, and you're in the backcountry of Ensenada, and into some gnarly stuff, like right away, just like hills and valleys and up and down. But when the pack starts out, everybody's tight together kind of thing, right? The intervals were, I think, a minute or 2 minutes apart between riders. So fairly quickly, everybody's bunching up a bit here and there, right? So one thing I noticed instantly was I'm in the dust, and the dust plays a big role in this whole race. And the place hadn't seen rain down there for, I don't know when the last time was, so it was super dusty.
Yeah.
And
this is nighttime.
yeah, and this is nighttime, exactly. Wow. So, those Baja Designs XL80 headlights are amazing, but
not in the dust.
Not in the dust. No, it just forms a wall of light
Yep.
That you can't see ahead of. So, as per the plan, I just stay calm, maintain as much speed as I can without putting myself at risk by, going too fast in the dust. And I wasn't going to, I did pass a couple bikes, a couple guys. And then right away there was like an XR, 650 I saw stalled over here. Right away, some people were having some problems with their bikes. But I just, get 100 miles down was kind of my thing, right? Get that under your belt and, with no incidents and go from there.
And in any other ride, 100 miles is a big day.
Yeah.
That is your big day.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
And, I did manage that. And in the first 100 miles, I was in my coat and I had muffs on my bars. Because
I saw a picture of that.
Yeah, because it gets cold
Yep.
at night, and particularly up north. Like the second night when I was way more south, that wasn't an issue at all. But hitting some zones, and some of the dudes I noticed were just in jerseys, and
Oh my goodness.
and they some valleys and some.
Yeah, because when you go into those valleys, all those cold
Oh,
airs
man.
in there.
Yeah.
And you wouldn't think in Baja, but like it would approach 0, degrees Celsius kind of thing. I was like, there was times when I was freezing and I was wearing my coat and I was wearing, a buff and the hand thing sort of thing. And you go from super cold and then the temperature would go up and getting hot, and I'm still wearing the jacket and the buff and all that. And so right away, I was sweating, when I was out of those valleys and that sort of thing. And the terrain was more technical than I was expecting right away. So, I knew right away this is, in the first 100 miles, I knew this is going to be a challenge for sure. But the first section for sure was just like dust, because everybody's bunched up. And also at night, like tends to not be any breeze. So the dust just hangs, right? So you'd come into these valleys, and as the sun was coming up, it looked like fog, but it was actually just dust from all the racers going through, and it's just sitting, not clearing at all. So I made it to 100 miles, and the sun had started to come up, and which would have been like, I guess, like 6 a.m. kind of thing, or 5:30 maybe. And I passed. There's mile markers that show you, maybe every 10 or 20 miles. It's like,
Oh, that's terrible.
Oh, man.
Yeah.
It's like watching paint dry.
exactly. So 100 miles came up, and I was like, way to go, Rideout. We're in this. We did 100 miles.
That's wild. Like if you think about the logistics to get a mile marker down on a 1,200 mile plus course in the middle of nowhere in some places. Like would these be everywhere or just in like the main areas?
Everywhere, to be honest. Like they did a really good job with arrowing, and you have the GPS, but largely, the arrows, I didn't have to look down that much because the arrows were so good.
Oh wow.
Yeah, at all the turns, there'd be huge sections where there's no forks or no turns, but you'd come to the fork of the turn and there's an arrow. So that helped a lot with the navigation kind of thing. But so I made it to 100 miles, and I was like, the sun's coming up, and I'm like patting myself on the back. And around mile 110, sun was in my eyes now in the dust, and I had a layer of dust on my goggles from the night. And I'm cruising along, and all of a sudden, like, wham, I'm on my face, and basically I didn't see like a crack or a rock that was like angled that I would have kind of had to jack the front end up to get over. And all of a sudden my front end was like 3 feet to the left, and my weight was going straight, right?
Oh no.
No prep. Yeah. And just like hammered onto the ground and like, tuck and roll. And I was like, holy, what was that Rideout? What was that? And I roll over on my back, and I had dirt and dust in my mouth, and I could tell my face had hit like the front of my helmet or the peak of like the nose piece of my goggles or something. And so I just like exhale, like, like to get dust and dirt in my mouth. and I'm laying on my back and like straight into the air and then straight down onto my goggles is like blood splatter. You know?
man.
Yeah. Oh yeah. And I'm just like laying on my back, like, okay, here we go. You know, here's the trials and tribulations kind of thing.
Yep.
And so I sit up and get up, you know, and kind of clear the cobwebs and try to assess the situation. I knew I was hurt, but I didn't know, you know, is this going to be a deal breaker? My left wrist, you know, definitely felt like I'd hammered it on the ground or it hooked in my hand guards or something, right? And so I'm kind of shaking it off. My inReach had like snapped off my backpack and like flew across the trail. My helmet light, you know, I had like Task Racing helmet light. It hammered off and like was like dangling off of me.
You had a bit of a yard
I was
sale.
gonna say, yard sale.
Oh,
That
man.
sounds like a skier.
There's the wipeouts where, you know, you kind of get into a rut and, you know, it's slow motion, kind of like left, right, and then you end up tipping over. This one was just like whammo. I'm just down, you know, I don't even know what happened kind of thing.
What speeds were you at?
I would say, you know, 20 or 30 miles an hour, like nothing too crazy.
Fast enough.
Yeah, fast enough. And it was just like face like into the ground kind of thing, right?
Well, you wouldn't want to roll out of a car doing 20 miles
wouldn't.
an hour.
No.
So, of course, here comes a couple bikes, you know, catching up to me, and they go by me. Everything okay? Yeah, I'm good. I give them the thumbs up, but I didn't even know if I was at that time, kind of thing, right? Still kind of assessing. And so I got the inReach and put it back on my backpack, and I thought, oh, good time to text the boys, you know, my chase team, and say, hey, I just had a crash, you know. I was meeting them at mile 155, so it was like 50 miles out or so, and I was like, I'm okay, you know, but we can assess when I see you, you know, adios kind of thing. So I managed to ride the 50 miles and got to them, and they're like, what happened? I just like a face plant, you know. And basically I took like my glove and pulled up my jacket, and I took my jacket off at that time because it was getting warm, but my wrist had already like had like a swelling, you know, on the back, like a bit of a sack of fluid going, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's like, okay, you know, I'm only 150 miles in on this thing, and I just jacked my wrist up, you know, and it didn't feel like, oh, it's broken or I can't use it. It was like, this is going to hurt tomorrow kind of feeling, right?
Yeah.
Like it jumped out of place and back in, or that, you know, that sort of feeling. So I was able to pull the clutch in. I was able to, you know, I rode the 50 miles out, even though it hurt for sure. But I just said to the guys, and I could see the look on their face when they saw that it was already swelling, you know, and the little look of concern there. I'm like, I just looked at Kev. I said, get the tape, you know.
Get the tape.
Yeah, and he did. And we taped it up and wiped my face off of blood. And, you know, my lip was fat and split kind of thing. And it was just like kind of, I'd say it kind of like inspired me even more to, you know, I had the taste of blood in my mouth now, you know, like this thing is, you know.
Blood in the water.
Exactly, yeah. So it was like, you know, even more so I got to focus more because I can't have another one of those. And I just got on the gas, and, you know, and at this, now by this time the dust was clearing in the daytime, and there was a mild breeze, which is clearing some of the dust. So did well, and then Garrett and his buddies that were down there, just checking out the scene, and they stopped in a few times to visit me and make sure everything was good with the bike and all that, but they were doing their own thing, just checking out the race. His buddy Jeremy wants to do the race next year, so they were pre-riding some of the course and just getting him kind of acclimatized and checking on me at the same time. They stopped at like mile 3 something to see me, you know, and so I came along, and there were those guys, and they were also at the first check with the other guys at race mile 155, and they're like, you know, how's the wrist? And I was like, no better, no worse, you know, so that's a good thing, right? I'm still using it. It's one of those things where if I had stopped for even an hour, you know, it just would have stiffened right up and would have been useless, but you keep using it, block out the pain, and keep rocking and rolling, and it was fine.
Wow. That's impressive. I was watching you. I was tracking you quite closely. And it was around the 100 mile. I noticed you had stopped, and I remember saying to Christine, I don't think something's not right. And sure enough,
Yeah.
that was your downtime.
For sure, and that was a good 15 minutes probably that I really had to
Yep.
gather my stuff and
This is a very cool app
clear
to
up
watch.
the yard sale. Yeah, it is, isn't it?
Really, yeah, it updated every minute. You can see how fast he's going at that update and watch and so you can really get a feel of the whole race.
You get
know?
a bit antsy though when you see 0 miles an hour.
Yeah,
And you're
absolutely.
like, oh man, is he okay? Like, what's going on?
There wasn't many of them, but there were
No.
a few times.
And like for a bit of background on that, like the whole thing is that you have to. And they put the score puts this out. You have to maintain 25. I think it was 24.5 miles an hour. Average speed, and it's simple math, obviously, to get there inside the 50 hours, right? So my whole goal was to maintain 30 miles an hour, like to have a bit of padding for incidents and whatever, right? So up until then, I was maintaining like 27, 28 miles per hour, which was pretty good, right? Another thing I want to say that I hadn't sort of focused on yet was the people, even at 2 a.m, like you get out, as soon as I got off the highway, you're coming across these parties scenes right on either side of the course, and there's these bonfires with all the locals from whatever town you're near, and they're drinking beers and they're just carrying on, and the one thing that like I kind of screwed up on a bit was like they're yelling and they're like windmilling their arms and they're just going so crazy, because they're super fans and this is their life, that I'd like pull over and stop. They'd be like yelling like at the top of their lungs and waving their arms. So I'd assume that, my backpack was coming off and was like caught in my rear wheel or something, right? So I pull over to like stop, and of course that would drive them like way more nuts. So now they're, vamos, or whatever. They're yelling and screaming and like, trying to wave me on.
Rookies.
And I'm like, oh, sorry, exactly. And this happened like, 3 or 4 times where like they're yelling at me so hard and waving their arms. Like there must be something wrong, this can't be right. But they're just so excited. And,
they're super
And
pumped.
what's the story of them gearing you up for that highway crossing?
oh man, that was a good one. Yeah, that was at like race mile 9 something or
jumping
1,000.
ahead
Way
here.
in there. I know,
Jumping ahead
but
here, Milne.
Yeah.
I like it.
There's a few
Yeah, I
miles
know.
in between.
Yeah, I mean, but that's just another, it's just the culture down there is so race focused, right? Like
That's so cool.
I told someone, I was like, back here, you go out and do a bunch of wheelies in your little town here or whatever, you better race back and hide after because, someone might call the cops, a dog walker or whatever.
Yeah.
You do that down there and they're like chasing you for your autograph. Like they're just so into it. Like it's amazing. And like, you're a hero to them, right? Like it's like the NFL to them, in the States.
Right.
It's the biggest deal. So yeah, they're so excited, and there's families all lining the track. There's like everybody's like just so amazing. And anytime I had an issue or would pull over and stop, like they're just right on you, like what do you need, kind of thing, right? Which is great. And like that post, I basically had a couple 100-mile stretch of really hard, like baby head, just technical, beating me up hardcore, and it was super hot, and I pulled off the course, and it was like a little highway section, then onto the route, and there was a few pit crews and just people congregating like there is at anywhere near the highways, and these guys all ran up and they're like, what do you need, amigo, and basically helped me off the bike, and and they're just anywhere you stop, they're just so into it, and everybody wants to help so hardcore,
Yeah.
And even like the Baja pits, which is the company that does all the gas stops, right? And you pay, and because your own personal chase team can't get everywhere where the race is going,
Right.
you need to have gas stops. So you pay this Baja Pits company. There's a couple of the companies, and they have gas stops every 50 miles, which is, which is all you need to get, as far as gas. And I was hitting every second one, every 100 or so.
Right.
But you roll into them and they're just like on you like a indie pit crew, and
Cool.
as Ironman, I was like, no, whoa, stand down, I need like a minute here, and they'd have you filled up with gas and like.
So do you have to pay on like at the pump essentially, or is that
No,
something you prearrange?
you prearrange, yeah. So
Cool.
And you have their sticker on your bike, so they know when you pull in, and
Okay.
yeah, and they'd have bananas and water and food.
Cool.
So often, I'd be like, comida, which is food, and they just give you whatever they have, and take a moment there,
What's so what? Maybe you can talk us through what the race track is, like the course is actually like. Like, is it ATV trail? Is it single track? Is it everything? Like,
That's a good question, and to be honest, it's it's basically like a trophy truck, race course is what it ends up being, because they're the ones that are pre-riding it more than anybody else, and that's what it kind of blows up into. So even tight stuff, after it's been hammered down at 100 miles per hour by trophy trucks,
Wow.
yeah, it gets real. What it does is blows all the dust and the dirt out and leaves rock behind, right? So it just makes for really technical, difficult terrain. Like
So you guys aren't like flying through those sections.
No, not at all, right? I think my overall, I think average in the end was like 27 miles per hour or so, or 26. Which was just enough, right?
Yeah.
And with something this long, and being that it was 1,200 and some miles this year, I thought there's going to be like lots of high speed stuff, right? They're going to sprinkle in tons of of nice sandy road and all that to make up for the distance, kind of thing. But what I found was that those sections were short and few, far between.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what you need those sections, right?
Yeah,
Both
for
to
sure.
recover and then to boost your average kind of as the race goes on. But the day one, I'll say I did pretty well, and the wrist was doing okay, and the daytime dust wasn't an issue. But then the get into that second night.
So just so we're clear, you haven't slept at all at this point.
No.
Like, you've been on the bike legit constant from start up until this point, going into your second night.
That's right.
Nonstop.
So
Is that a dark time when you're literally?
yeah,
Like, is it one of
well,
those moments like, oh, here we're going into it? Excuse me, John. We're actually in the middle of a podcast.
Technology fail.
that's hilarious. Yeah, so going into that second night, things I'd been doing well, especially considering the wrist and that initial crash. My average was, I think it was 28 miles per hour, and I was targeting like 30, right? And I was like, so this is good. But on that second night, as the sun started going down, I started noticing that these pit crews, like with these crazy trucks, were showing up on the side of the course, especially anywhere near a road kind of thing. And they had these huge like light setups, that crank up on a crank, and huge lighting boxes, and like these sections left and right had, they were basically blowing it up into daylight with these crazy lights, and a huge, carpet mat, landing pad with 4 massive tires on all corners, right? And I was like, okay, this is where the trophy, I could just sense that the trophy trucks were starting to catch me, right? And at the same time, the crowds, anywhere near a town were starting to get huge and more rowdy, and so I knew like they're not here for me, kind of thing. And it was like, here comes the trophy trucks.
And that's a big deal. The trophy trucks make a mess, and they scare the shit out of you, don't
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, someone posted a video of a trophy truck going by at night from Baja, and
it
the
was Darrin,
sound is
actually.
unreal. Yeah, was it your video?
Yeah.
It was bananas, man. Like, that would scare the shit out of me.
Yeah.
With the trophy trucks, Darren, do they have some sort of beacon system? Like, did they know when they're coming up on a moto guy, or
Yes.
are you listening for the noise to get out of the way?
Well, they have the Stella system as well, right? So we have to have part of the rules like flashing lights on our backs of our helmets and backpacks. So they're like the little bicycle ones, but they're LED and they're quite bright. So generally they do see that, even though they're going so fast. And then they have a button that they can press that basically lights my Stella up, saying, get over, and it beeps, and it says, is telling me to get the heck over. So there was times when, I would, the first while, or the first few trucks that I came across, they'd come up on me, and I'd notice my shadow right away, and I was so alert to it and worried about it that I would get over the trail like way in advance, and they'd go by, and I'd look and I'd see, Monster Energy on the side or whatever. I'd be like, oh man, I wonder if that's Ken Block or something. This is cool,
Yeah.
And like 3, I'd say 2 or 3 later, I was like, this is horrible, because like, the novelty wore off super fast, right?
Yeah.
How many trophy trucks were in the race?
Lots.
Yeah, there's tons. Yeah.
So like the first 3 go by, and there's about 64 more coming.
Exactly.
More than that. There's
Really?
lots. Yeah, I can't remember.
Toby
but-
Price was there from Australia.
Yeah, he was. Yeah.
Yeah, maybe he passed you.
Oh, he
did.
Yeah. Well, him or, I don't know what driver they would have been on because they shift drivers, right?
So
But,
you were like within 25 feet of Toby Price at one point. In
oh,
time.
yeah.
Possibly.
Yeah, possibly.
Yeah.
No, that is
Now
exciting.
I want your autograph.
Yeah. So there was times when these trucks would come up on me, and I'd see like a little couple flickers of light, and I'd see my own shadow on the trail, and I'd know one's coming, and I would count to like 4 seconds, and that's all I'd have to get over, and wheel, here it comes,
Wow.
So the trails are, they're rutted on both sides, again, rough from trophy trucks and, the pre-riding and everything. So you try to like shift over, get into the desert or just off the trail. And of course your front tire's just riding the edge because you're in a rut, right?
Yeah.
And there was times when like I'd like tuck and roll, like literally, and the thing would go by and my bike's like
You're coming right off the bike.
coming right off the bike for sure in an effort to get the heck out of the way. And, if you didn't get over in time, they would hit the button and, it was very rare when that would happen, but they're coming so fast. I was under the impression that, I'd see the whole valley light up or, it'd be like a football field all of a sudden, right? But they're going, and they have the lighting for that, but they're coming so fast that they're, they're outriding the lights kind of thing. And
Yeah.
again, you'd see like a flicker of LED light and my own shadow, and it'd be like 3-4 seconds and they're on me. And I'm doing, like sometimes 40, 50 miles an hour, and that's how it would be.
So how long? So did they all pass you at a certain point, or did this just keep going on?
Well, that's it. Like, so that second night going into it, I was doing really well. And then every time a trophy truck would come up, I'd have to pull over and stop. And then, of course, they kick up like so much dust, like, So it's dust and silt hanging in the air, and you can't ride in that. So you got to wait for the dust to clear. So it might be 30 seconds or a minute. And then, you go, and here comes another trophy truck. So why would I, why bother getting out on the track? So I'd stay over. Here comes the other one. And so that's what, was repeating on that second night. And so, I made it through the night, but like hours into it as well, there was like a fog. Basically, we got over to the East Coast. I think it was right near Loretto. And I'm used to riding in this cloud of dust, all night I've been in this dust basically.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden my goggles go like wet, like moisture kind of thing, right? Like, what is that? Like I'm sweating and everything, but that's weird. So take my goggles up and it's just thick fog, like come just off the ocean along this section along the coast. And so now there's this thick fog and this dust, like with the trucks. So
Perfect combination.
Oh yeah, so I
Muddy goggles.
I couldn't wear my goggles, but in my eyes was like dust and this fog water like mixing, causing like a mud, in your eye. And like by the time I got out of that area, I was wet, like from the moisture of the fog. And so by the time the morning came of that second night, I was down to like 25 miles per hour average speed from like 28 kind of thing, right? And so
And how many hours are you in at this point?
I would say
Like in the 30s?
yeah, exactly, like approaching 30 kind of thing, right? And basically on the stop where I met up with Kevin, the boys, in the night or basically late that second night, I said, good idea, maybe refresh my undergear and all that. And that's
That is definitely the most famous line of the whole Baja 1000.
I don't know. It was funny as hell. Yeah, I was so beat by the finish line. But we were gonna like change some of my gear and freshen things up, socks and that sort of thing to prevent like the trench foot and all that. And but by the time that morning came, I was really close to the cutoff point of 50 hours, right? And so I said, no, we're going to skip that. I got to get on the gas. But I was in and out of, waves of super highs, and like just being so in it and on it and, at one with the bike. And then there'd be like, my body would run out of fuel and zest, and then it'd just be like hit this wall, and then I'd have to talk myself out of that wall or have a half a sandwich or whatever it was, right, at the next stop.
And were you mainly sitting or standing, or was it kind of 50-50?
Yeah, like 50-50 for sure. The high speed stuff, sitting, I'd definitely sit. And then like the last quarter, like I'd have to hit a bump, to get up on my pegs, to boost me up off the seat. And then like I couldn't lower myself on the seat. I'd just fall, like collapse kind of thing onto
Yeah.
the seat. And but it was a perfect mix, and I had that air cushion that I sewed into my pants. I don't know
Is
if
that what I touched earlier?
It's right there.
Yeah,
I wish I
exactly.
didn't touch that. actually.
Yeah.
That's
Protect
what
your
that
hands.
is.
Oh, you touched that? Ooh.
Never wash your hand again.
I was curious what it was. Now I'm not.
Yeah, and so my butt was great. And, so many people reached out. Oh my God, your butt must have been so, raw. And then Garrett had told me his was like,
Gonna fall off.
oh yeah, just beat, like raw hamburger
Maybe-
kind of thing.
Maybe you're onto something. You
Oh,
should start a new
telling ya.
Baja product.
Yeah, it worked out great. It worked out great on the butt.
So it sounds like, we're kind of reaching a climax to the point where you kind of know you're gonna finish. Like, was there
Mm-hmm.
a point where you kind of went, "Yep, I'm gonna be able to complete this for sure."
Yeah, absolutely. So going
At
into
the finish line.
going into the going into the third night, which sounds crazy.
Third night.
Yeah, and it
Yeah.
was because if you
Yeah.
remember,
Bananas, man.
we did our very first podcast the night that he was coming into the finish line, and
Right.
we talked to Lee Martin from Rally Connects for a little bit, and we wagered a little bet, and we're like, okay, we think he's going to be in at midnight.
Yeah, and everyone was like, "Oh, you don't have any faith in Darrin. You're putting him way out there
Yeah,
at
yeah.
like 1 o'clock
I'm
in
like,
the
no,
morning."
I'm thinking one.
Oh man.
But this is our time too.
Yeah,
right?
they're all like, "He's gonna finish at midnight."
Yeah, yeah.
Midnight, I wish.
You didn't. It was 4:30 our time.
Yeah.
yeah. But
Oh, okay. All
yeah,
right.
yeah.
So yeah. Anyways, I got through the day, and as the sun was going down on that third night, I managed to boost my average speed up to a little closer to reasonable, like 27 kind of thing, and I was shooting for 30. Right, 30 would have got me there in 40 hours, but but the sun starts going down, and I'd done all right, and got my speed back up. Less dust. All the trophy trucks are going by me now. And I was on the gas. I was doing really well, and then basically I come to this section where it's just whoops as far as the eye can see. So it's like sandy, awesome high speed stuff, and I'm doing great. And then coming to the top of this hill, and like down the hill and up the other side is like a valley that just goes on forever, and it's just like 12-foot wide trail of whoops that are like 4 feet high kind of thing.
Wow.
Sandy, silty. Yeah, and at this point, like 30 some hours in, right? And I'm just like, okay, how am I going to do this? Anyways, I managed, stand up, and you can't do them fast, especially as an Ironman kind of thing. The racing guys, get on the gas and
Like, is there any way to kind of ride the side to make them less
a little
intense?
bit. There's some areas, yeah, exactly, where they're less deep here and there, and you crisscross sometimes, and you just get into this pattern of whoa,
Yeah.
whoa, whoa, and like riding the clutch even at the bottoms to get a little bit of extra traction. And then I get to the other side, up in the top of this next hill that was, as far as the eye could see from over there. And at the top of the hill, here's the same thing again, as far as the eye can see. And so my goal was to meet the chase guys at mile 10:55. That was my my next big goal. And I get to the other side of that again, and the same thing again. And this happened like repeatedly, like 8-10 times.
Oh my god!
And like I was calling out in the night, like, no, I get to the top of the second peak, and then here's the same thing again. And I just suddenly started getting the feeling that I'm crossing the whole peninsula, like in whoops, right?
Yeah.
Like, and then I recalled the conversation with this guy, Kevin Johnson, who came by the Baja Powerhouse, and we're going over the map, and he's showing me some stuff because I didn't pre-ride and everything. And I remember him saying, down here, Darrin, you're going to get into like this section that's 80 miles of whoops.
Wow.
Oh
And I remember thinking he must have said 18,
Yeah.
that,
Not 80, yeah.
no, that wasn't 80, that was 18. So as I'm doing this section, it's like this, okay, now it's coming back to me, 80 miles of whoops. So
That makes sense because we were watching the tracker pretty consistently at that point.
Yeah.
And I think you were like less than 200 kilometers away, or 200 miles away from the finish line. And I was like, oh, well, shit, man. He because we were watching, you were at like 400 miles, and then you'd made the 200, like the first 200 out of that last 4 in pretty good time. And I'm like, well, he'll be there. No worries. Like, he'll be there like pretty fast. And then it just it went on
Drag.
forever.
Yeah,
So
and
it sounds like that's exactly why. It's
Absolutely.
80
And I have to
miles.
say, from my side, I stayed up all night. You could have hurried up a little bit.
I'm sorry about that.
Seriously.
You had
I
a
stayed
big
up all
race.
night. I'm like, what's going on?
You had a big race. the
What a
next day.
jerk.
Yeah.
He's probably stopping for
I had
tacos.
to get up the next day, for
Yeah.
Arden.
So, so I managed like finally these whoops trickle off after like hours and hours and hours, and I'm sweating profusely, and I'm out of juice, right? And I finally meet up with the team, and I was just, this is like so many other sections before, and I'm like glossing over all this, but I hit such a hard and difficult section, and I'd have a few come offs and this and that, and by the time I got out of it and I'd meet up with the team or hit a section of highway, I'd be so jacked up from that being behind me, knowing I made it through that, like I lived through that.
Yeah.
That I'd be just ready to take on the next thing, which is weird. You'd think you'd be exhausted and I can't take any more. But every time I got through one really difficult thing that I never thought I'd get through, I'd come out the other side just so pumped up and jacked that I'd run into my guys and I'd be, just like high fives and, oh my God, how you doing? And how's the wrist? I'd be like, I'm amazing. I'm so good because,
Let's go.
because I lived through that,
Yeah.
Wow.
and so that's how it was. It was like on to the next thing,
So it sounds like the key was kind of like small victories.
For
along the
sure,
way.
for sure. And when I came out of that set of whoops, and I started, when you're coming towards town and where you see the mileage and you can see where you're going to be meeting your guys, definitely the throttle starts getting open more and more. And there was that night, sort of on that route to 1055 meetup, mile 1055. The crowds were gathering in fires, and I get to this. I come out of basically the desert, and there's this row of on basically pit area, so it's vehicles and fires and party going on both sides. And I was like on the gas, doing really well, and I come into this area and I instinctively like down a couple gears and slow down, because there's people around and trucks and things are happening. And right away, everybody starts yelling, like again, like waving their arms and going ballistic and shouting at me. So I swear I heard like Darrin, I heard my name, and they're looking at the app too, and they're seeing what's going on, right? So I just get on the gas, like up into fourth, and I'm zipping through this, the fires are starting to streak by me, and I can see them cheering and waving their arms. And I start coming to the end of this row, and I see these two guys holding flag, like orange banners, saying and they're waving go in between us, go here. And what's on the other side of them is just like blackness. I don't know what it is. And I kick it up into fifth, and now I'm doing
Of course.
and
Giver.
I'm so jacked from getting through those whoops, and I'm gonna see my guys. And as I get closer, I can see that there's cops and then what they're doing is stopping traffic, and what this is like a highway crossing. I had no idea until I was 20 feet up to the thing, and it's like this ramp, like a jump going up, and I hit it, doing 50 miles an hour or something. And I hear
As you do.
I can hear the crowd going crazy behind me. And I'm just floating in the air, a couple revs, brah, 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 in the air.
Was it like the movies where it slowed down a little bit?
Man.
Slow-mo?
It was so amazing. For
Like that
sure.
character from Toy Story, the crazy
Yeah.
Canuckner.
Yeah, you're a Duke Kaboom.
I was a Duke Kaboom, absolutely. And, and I couldn't see the landing or anything, and flew way over the highway, and
Not sketchy at all.
yeah. And it could have been a corner, I don't know. But anyways, it was just a dead straight, and I landed. And that got me so jacked up. And when I met my guys, I was describing that
You should see what I just did.
caught so much air, and people were cheering my name, and that was 10:55. So at that point, I thought, I've got this kind of thing,
Yeah.
and I thought this is going to open up to some easy, more highway type stuff, or transit, and coming into La Paz for the last 200 or so miles, but it didn't, and it was the last 200 miles were so hard.
Yeah, it's terrible. I remember looking at the app because I didn't sleep, and I was watching, and there was a little section on that app that you could click on Google Maps. It would show you exactly where he is.
Mountains.
Yeah, and it was. I'm like, what are they doing to this poor bastard?
Oh, it was so hard. It was so hard.
Yeah, I think we had a brief conversation. I think you were still down there or something. We were talking on the phone. And it was like, so was it hard all the way to the end, or did it lit up for the last hunt? He's like, no.
No.
It was like rough,
Brutal to the
trail
end.
all the way to the end.
It was so hard, and like the time I'd made up, you know, in the day before, and like since the trophy trucks were all ahead and everything, like that last 200 miles, you know, I think I went from 28 or so miles per hour to the finish, you know, it was like 26, which is, you know, I still had like 4 or 5 hours, you know, until the 50-hour mark, but I could have, you know, if it wasn't for those last 200 being so hard, and obviously my body had taken a beating at that point, I certainly could have done a bit better, but I was definitely happy with, you know, finishing in the time, you know. And when I finally did, you know, I kept thinking in those last 200 miles, I'm going to come over this hill and I'm going to see lights of Bay of LA, and then it's going to spill me onto the highway for like a huge 100-mile transit section. You know, that was what I was dreaming of in my head. But when I finally did spill out onto the road and I turned right and I could see the lights and the finish line, you know, is in my head, and here comes this guy on a bike beside me, you know, right up like 2 feet away from me. And he's got his iPhone in his hand, and he's like, yeah, right on, bro. And I'm like, right on. I give him like a, you know, hang 10 kind of thing or whatever. I'm like, who's this guy? And I look again, and it's Jeff Pilon. I'm like, yeah.
He is literally everywhere.
Everywhere.
Yeah, it's Jeff Pilon. No helmet on or anything, you know. And he's just like, woo, yeah, right on, brother.
So was he just waiting for you to pop out?
Yeah,
That's
he
hilarious.
was. Yeah, and it just got me so stoked, you know. And so, yeah, he's taking, you know, video of me on his phone and basically escorted me to the finish line.
Sweet.
Where Kev and Tim and RJ and the other Tim were all waiting, and that's it. And, you know, the rest is kind of history.
That was the
And
famous
what was that
finish line
feeling?
video.
What was that feeling crossing the finish line?
Well, you know, I definitely, I thought like I'm going to be like a mess. I'm going to bawl my eyes out and that sort of thing. But just had nothing, you know, I had nothing. I didn't have tears to cry, you know.
And
Like,
you look pretty spent.
yeah, you know,
you did,
Kim said like, you know, I don't recognize that guy. Who was that guy? You know, because I was just like this shell of myself, basically, right?
We were getting a kick out of it.
Oh,
It's
yeah.
like, you know, we know you, right? So it's like we're looking at you talk, and does he even know what he's saying right now?
It's hallucinating.
Oh, yeah. and
Because you
I-
kept looking up and looking
Yeah.
around, and then you're like talking to some dude over there, like, and I'm like, is there actually a guy
Oh,
he's
yeah.
pointing to, or is that like
That's-
he's imagining it?
Exactly. That was Charlie, a dude we know down there, kind of thing, a local dude. But he was just like, you know, in that time, like, right out, you know, yelling at me. But other people said, were you seeing like Charlie, your daughter, you know, in
what I
that
thought it
moment,
was,
you know? Yeah, exactly. I'm like, no, it's an actual Charlie. But
An actual dude.
But yeah, I pulled up and it's like high fives and hugs all around. And then I was like, get me a beer, you know, like. So-
I don't think I've ever seen somebody chug a beer as quick as the one on the
That was
on
that
the
was the
finish line.
second one, you know,
Wow.
and
It looked like it, yeah.
yeah, but
Glump.
for sure it was the tastiest couple Bud Lights I've ever had.
Bet.
So huge undertaking. You make it to the finish line, and you've had some time to digest, you know, what's happened. It'd be interesting to know what your expectations were, like what you thought it was going to be like and what was going to happen versus what really did go down, and how the experience really was. Like, what are some of the things that stood out that were like that? Were they the same, or was there some stuff that you were like, whoa, didn't expect that at all?
Yeah, I'd say like, well, one thing, you know, I told my guys like have like a pep talk ready, you know, have a pep talk ready. Like if I take this thing and I hold it hostage and I say, I'm going to tap out, you know, I got the knife around the throat of this thing, you know, you have to talk me off the ledge, you know, like,
Yeah.
so I said this, you know, to Tim and I think Kev, like have some ammo
Yeah.
ready to talk me off the ledge and release the hostage, so to speak. Because you don't know where your wall is or what's going to happen. Right.
Right.
And, you know, at the start line, I'm sitting there with 13 dudes and they all look like beasts. They all look like the hardest core dudes. Right. And it's like, you know, that less than half are going to finish because, you know, you've been watching this race for years. You know, where am I going to land and all that, right? And I guess I was shocked with like how well I just managed to, you know, pain management and not, you know, even think of tapping out
Right.
at any point, kind of thing.
I think at one point Tim called you or said it was beast mode.
Yeah.
He's in beast mode.
Yeah, I just wanted it so bad, and at that 10:55, you know, race mile meeting with the guys, I said to Tim, I remember as I was like about to pull out, I said, where are we meeting next? Where's the next race mile? And he said, the finish.
Fuck.
Yeah.
I'm ready for another 1,000 miles. Let's go.
There was a part of me that was disappointed, right? I was just like, holy cow, can this thing be ending? Because
I'm into it now.
Yeah, I'm into it. Yeah, I've been in this for like 40 hours, and I was just so even jacked up right at the end. That kind of surprised me.
Yeah. Well, that kind of segues into one of the questions we've been getting via the Instagram post. So Len316, he wanted to know, what's going on in your head, kind of like after the 800-mile marker, like because you're well into it at this point. Mm-hmm. Like, is that the point where you're like, yep, this is happening, or are you still like, ooh, this could go either way?
That was kind of the point where my average was sitting a bit low, average speed, and I was kind of on the threshold of getting inside the time, and that's actually like 8 something is where we had the Pitt and Larry Janeski, came up to our team and hi Darrin,
How cool is that?
Larry of Into the Dust, who is one of my sort of heroes. Like he's documented him and his son's journey through getting through Ironmaning the 1000, and they've done a few different classes through the years. And Larry came up and I was beat. This is 8 mile 8 something, and it's super hot. We're now kind of fairly south, and
You were wearing black.
oh yeah, I was wearing black.
Good choice.
That was that could have been rethunk a bit for sure. So yeah, I had to come out and to this pit, and I'd just done like a super gnarly section, and I was beat. But there's Larry, and this is like a pick me up kind of thing, right? And but I said to Larry, I'm like, give me, because this was his section, or I knew he'd pre-ridden the whole track sort of thing. And I said, give me some good news, about the next couple 100 miles, Larry, like please, kind of thing. And I'm showing him my jacked up wrist, and my face is kind of busted up. And he's like, you're about to go into the hardest, section of the whole race, right now. Silt beds, climbing through mountains, just like a slog. And I was like, oh man, I didn't want to hear that from you right now, Larry. I was really hoping for a better pep talk,
All highway from here on out.
But he said at the end, he's like, Darrin, last year I didn't finish in the time. He said, Darrin, don't focus on the time, just finish. Don't worry about finishing in the time. And this is like a turning point moment for me. Inside of my head, I was saying like, screw that, Larry.
Fuck that,
I
Larry.
respect you so much, but fuck that, Larry.
Yeah.
That's not happening. I'm making this thing. And so I got on the gas again, and I was just like, just meeting him and his team was really a big boost for me. But that section was so hard. Oh my God, so hot and silt, and it was so bad. And I came out of that section, and I was really, really, really beat. But finally ended up on a transit section of highway, and that was around mile 900, and the sun was starting to go down. That's where I really started to have internal pep talks, And I got on the highway, and I was swerving and weaving on the highway, like I was just like
Like on purpose, or 'cause
no,
you were fucked?
just like out of like body weakness and just a combination. My mind was starting to go a little bit crazy, and like.
Well, you're at this point. You're what, day 2?
Third night.
Going into the third night, so like, no big deal. I haven't slept for 3 days.
Nonstop.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But to answer Len's question, that when Larry told even like mentioned the thought of not finishing inside the time, and I told myself like F that.
Yeah.
That to me was a turning point where I knew I'm gonna make it.
Cool, man.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Has there been any unexpected, like once you're done home, any health side effects or injuries that are coming out because of the distance you ran?
Yeah, for sure. I on that initial crash, I also hammered my knee like super hard. This my left knee. I broke my knee pad, like blew it apart, kind of thing on the impact.
Wow.
But the wrist was like the overshadowing injury kind of thing. So that is still bugging me, and it's not like I blew it out or anything. It's just an impact injury, but it's really hurting. But I also had like a weird things flare up in my back, like one of my shoulder blades, like just a knot that came out of nowhere. And I went to see my massage therapist, who's a friend of mine, and like, this just came out of nowhere, And she's like,
Well, no.
She's like, yeah, well,
Came out of the Baja.
Yeah, exactly. That didn't just come out of nowhere.
It's your muscle going.
Yeah.
Nuh-uh.
That, and just extreme fatigue. Like, just, I felt like I've had mono for like 3 weeks, and I'm coming out of that now. Like, finally, I've been able to ride like the stationary bike, and I don't want to lose everything I gained from all the
Right.
training going into this, right? Like, so I'm just now able to ride like the stationary bike. My wrists, brutal, obviously the one that I sprained and kept riding on, but even the other one, I'd hit a silt bed or a silt rut sometimes, and the only way out of the silt rut is to just open it wide open, and because it's just like hitting mud, kind of like it just bogs you right down, slows you down, and little, did I know in that rut is also like a big rock sort of crevasse or cliff, like a 1 foot sort of ledge, let's just say.
Yeah.
And it's all been buried by the silt from like the trophy trucks and stuff. So my instinct is hammer on the gas and build speed to get out of this. And then you'd hit this ledge, this rock, that's built, part of the mountain or whatever. And like, instantly your bars go up, a foot or 18 inches. Your wrists are just like, what was that,
Yeah.
And I'd take the whole GPS and Stella setup in the chest and half over the bars, and then
Been there.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah,
We've
yeah.
all been there.
Yeah,
We've
yeah.
all been there. Those ones that you hit that you're not expecting,
Yeah.
right? When
Yeah.
you
Those are the
see the
worst.
thing coming,
Yeah.
your body kind of anticipates it and prepares or whatever you
Exactly,
do.
yeah.
When the worst ones are the ones you
don't
don't know
see.
are coming. Just
Yeah.
bam. So those are the ones that really had an effect on my wrists and that sort of thing.
So we got another question here that kind of maybe dovetails into this pretty nicely. So Dame337 wants to know, what you did for fitness, exercises and stretches, and basically, what your workup was in that sense. Because I imagine you kind of put some work in before you went to Baja.
Absolutely.
And do you feel that totally helped, or
Oh man.
is that what saved you?
For sure, and we're not gonna delve super deep into this because
Yeah.
I think we might have another fitness sort of podcast at some point or something, or talking about this another time. But I had a personal trainer, our buddy Steve, Thrash Moto Co. Basically, talking to him when we were all hype watching the Baja 1000 2020. When it ended, I basically committed, and I told him, I'm like, I'm gonna do it next year, And he's
So
like,
how many beers were involved in
definitely
that particular?
some for sure, some for
I
sure.
think you were actually at Sunny Hill Resort when wasn't that when Baja was on last year?
Yeah,
And
yeah.
I think we talked
yeah,
about it.
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're
Yeah,
absolutely
yeah.
right.
Yeah.
I was watching Harv Grant
Yes.
is like a guy that did it last year, and watching him on the app, exactly talking with you, and at that point I basically committed to myself that I'm going to do this. But one night I basically told Steve, like, I'm pretty sure I'm going to do this. He was over here at the shop, and he said, well, I'd love to be your personal trainer, military guy, major fitness guy, right? So I'm like, that's fantastic. Yeah, let's do that, right? So Steve, over the course of a year, basically starting at the very beginning and low impact and low, everything, eased me into this regiment of working out, like tire flips and squats and reverse lunges and this-
Very, very lower body core focused.
Absolutely,
exercises.
absolutely. Whole body movement stuff. And then I also did a pile of riding. This is very important. By the time I was in the start line, I was so at one with the bike. I had barely even driven this 501. And people were questioning that, like, oh, you should be riding this 501. Keith was questioning that. You guys should
Right.
trade bikes, me and Tim. I'm like, don't worry. I know the 501 already. It's such a close family member to my 500. Like,
Yeah.
it's not going to be a big deal, and I'm going to have so much time to get used to this.
Oh,
bike,
yeah, you are.
So that wasn't a concern to me. But I'd ridden over 200 hours the past season.
Right.
And besides the training with Steve, I just focused on riding a ton, right?
Well, saddle time is huge.
Saddle time is huge. At, Area 31, doing laps around the single track there, hitting all the OVR events.
Yeah, because
And-
I don't like you kind of kept it pretty low key.
I did.
for the most part.
Yeah,
And I remember at one point over the summer, I was kind of like, well, Darren's like, look at the shit he's doing over there at Area 31. Like, getting there, man. Like, there's some good riding going on. And then I've noticed that you come out to OVR and you weren't as gassed out as you normally are,
Oh.
like after certain sections. And I'm like, dude's been hitting the gym.
Mid-season, I was really hitting my stride, and I just started riding with like Owen Chapman, Rally Connects. We were teamed up for some
Well,
Rally
he's like
Connects
what?
events.
He's like 10, so he's got the
No, he's
stamina.
13.
Stamina of
Owen, rock star, first of all, but
Yeah.
he's like 19 or 20 or something, right?
Yeah.
So riding like full days with him, and once or twice he was like, Darrin, what do you do for exercise? Because you're not even sweating or breathing hard right now, and we're doing like the gnarliest stuff in Ontario, right? And I was basically feeling it build all summer, just like feeling like the best I've ever felt because I was just putting in the work, right?
right on.
Yeah.
Cool.
So it was a year of work to get
A
to build
year
up.
of hardcore work and not skipping days and being accountable to Steve,
Yeah.
and keeping it recorded. I was checking off all my times and dates of working out and what exactly I did. And I remember like looking back, like thinking, how many tire flips of the tractor tire have I done? And so I look back at my records, and it was like thousands and thousands,
Yeah.
from inside of that year, basically.
Well,
Right?
when you invest that kind of money into an event,
That's it.
you want to go finish.
Yeah.
And
That's
yeah,
it.
not even the money, it's the lifelong want of that event.
Totally,
Yeah.
totally. Nobody was going to stop me from doing this.
Yeah, very cool.
So what, along with that training regimen physically, did you do anything dietary wise? Like you mentioned, not drinking beer for a few months leading up, which is it's like
I know,
putting the
and-
fear of God into some people listening. I'm sure.
including me. It's
Terrible.
not my norm at
I
all.
would have
if
shut
you know me.
Baja down immediately if that's the.
So like I know that in my household, my wife, God love her, is a bit of an enabler at times, and it,
Not mine at all.
No.
I'm looking at her right now.
Yeah.
Yeah. She,
was that at all difficult? Where you kind of
Oh.
be like, hey, do you wanna hang out and have a couple drinks?
oh,
And you're
for
like,
sure, for
no,
sure.
I can't do it.
First of all, I really cut back on the drinking huge, right? And,
Yeah.
and I tried to taper that like from midsummer kind of leading into the fall. But also the eating, went out of my way to eat properly and I basically, I'm a tall, skinny guy, right? So when I first started the workout program with Steve, I was like, my biggest worry is I'm going to like basically go from 215 to 160 because that's like my default when I start doing any sort of working out because I'm, high metabolism, skinnier type dude, right? So, he said, don't worry about the weight and we'll concentrate on strength building and building muscle kind of thing versus like a ton of cardio, which would just basically shave me right down to nothing, right?
Yeah.
So with that, I did lose like 15, 20 pounds, which I was kind of aimed at. So I ended up like 195 or so going into the race, which at 46 years old, 6'3", was,
Sounds pretty good.
yeah, it was pretty good and worked out well. Yeah.
Cool. All right. Well, we got one last question. We've touched on some of this, but Van Cart would like to know, bike prep. We talked about your bike prep. What's a ballpark figure someone needs to shoot for financially to get something like this done? And how are your feet?
Yeah, it's a good question. Yeah, I posted a shot of my foot. Well, both feet were the same.
Disgusting.
But yeah, coming out of my boot, like that was basically the night of the race, basically, right?
like
When I
a
got in the
boiled
finish
sausage.
line. Yeah. So a lot of people were concerned, but that actually went away like within days, basically, right? And it was just like moisture and sweat and that sort of thing. And it was raw and sore like the next day. We're down at the beach and hanging out, and I'm in sandals, and it's like I was Tin Man, in general, right? Like walking.
Not going
kinda
into the
tight.
salt water.
No, but yeah, that went away quickly. Just to answer that question, basically once it dried up and had a few days to heal, kind of thing. But cost, for this and any sort of these, kind of
Just so we're aware, his wife is in the same room.
Yeah.
If you could cover your ears, Kev.
It's okay. Earmuffs. No,
It only cost $986.
she knows.
Yeah.
Of course, we discussed the budget beforehand, but
Yeah.
any international kind of race or event such as this, you're going to be north of $10,000. I'll just say that right away, right?
Yeah.
But there's a ton of factors that are going to play into how much above that you're going to be. I had a bike down there, Tim's bike I rode, we had that stuff already in place. But, I was down there a month, all around the event in total, right? So the pre-riding plus the vacation with Kim and all that. So that added to that. But the event itself was like $4,000 US.
Just to enter.
Just to enter.
Wow. And what do you get for that? Like, what do they give you? Just the privilege of taking part?
Pretty much.
And some tequila.
Pretty much. It is well done. Like when you go to the start line or the finish line, like it's a mega scene.
Well,
and the
they have mile
arrowing,
markers what is it, like 50 miles? Like,
exactly. Like the work that goes into it.
The
is
logistics
huge.
of that event is amazing.
It is. It really is. But, a lot of the people that are in it are pretty well-to-do. Those guys riding in the trophy trucks,
Yeah, they're not poor.
They're not poor, and they have huge sponsorship, so it's not an easy thing for anybody. But, I sold my Blazer. I don't need to explain how I paid for this, but, I sold my beloved 1970 Blazer earlier on in the season, and that kind of did well. And I made some money on that, and that's how I, that, and again, with the stars aligning, right? That sale happened. I did well on it. It went to like the U.S. and I sold it on an auction site. So
you didn't see it go by at Baja, did you?
No, I would have choked again. I would have been very mad. No. So that's how I managed to pull it off, basically.
And did you get help from any? Because you had a couple sponsors.
Yeah, like definitely like Giant Loop, for example. Giant Loop is a product I used for years on these on these bikes. The Mojave bag in particular. In Baja, and then I used to have the Great Basin set. I was more into dual sport and that sort of thing. So I reached out to Giant Loop right away. Here's my plan, and they were like, "Yeah, we're on board. We're gonna send you, a bag set, the tank bag, the handlebar bag, these straps." They sent me like a major box of their product, and I was like, "Wow," and that was huge. Other companies, they wanted like a race sort of, report filled out, what I'm planning on doing and my background and all this sort of thing. So I got little things here and there from that, but basically that's it. Baja, Ride Baja, Mexican Insurance. A little bit of support from them through reasonable insurance and swag and that sort of thing. You're mostly getting swag and maybe some bike parts.
Right.
Mike at Taco Moto was another huge help, and he gave me a sweet deal on all my parts.
Cool.
Yeah, and I mean, for the most part, as a a non-known racer, that's what you can expect. Is a good deal on parts and or some free stuff, right?
Cool. So as we close this out, are there any kind of lessons learned? Is there anything you would do differently if you did do it again, or for anyone that is planning to do it? Like, what are some of the takeaways that you kind of went, I might do that differently?
Well, not a lot. Like, I just got such good advice from everybody, and that's what you need to do anything like this, right? Like, as I was struggling, in the heat or in, race mile 900 and something, I had these little voices in my head of the people that were inputting and giving me advice throughout, the year, and you can even go as wide as 2 years lead up to the race.
Right.
And it was some of their experiences, like Lance Webb and Thordy, and those guys talking to me about, Romaniacs, they were near tapping out, and then they like leaned on each other and said, we'll just go one more, gas stop. And so I would say, like, you need to have a lot of input from people that have done similar things, or they've done, the event that you're planning on doing.
Right.
Not a lot that I would change, about my run. Don't crash. That's a good one, right? Like, I could have
Excellent advice.
Could have really
Rubber
done
side down.
Yeah, I could have really done without that initial crash, and I had I would say I came off the bike 8 or 10 times, like, to be honest.
Yeah.
In, 4 or 5 of them, really mild, and then 3 or 4 that were like, that could have been bad,
And were those 3 or 4 that were worse than the others? Were those like, what were those due to? Is that just, you were just tired and losing concentration?
Yeah, I would say, and you can't be focused like entirely for that amount of time. And it'd be like, just deflect off a baby head, and then, it rolls over, your front end rolls sideways over this rocks, and then, you try to overcompensate, and then it's a high side, and then just down, right? It just happens so fast. But that's kind of unavoidable in I think a 1,200 and some mile race. Sure. I'm sure other guys that, had their share of offs, and I saw a few. I came across a few.
Well, I mean, I'm thinking I probably have about 10 to 15 offs on a normal OVR excursion.
No, normal ride day.
You have about 10 to 15 offs in the first 10 kilometers.
Yeah.
Sounds about right.
So I think you're doing pretty good.
Yeah.
It's a good average.
Pretty clean ride.
Not a bad average, but no, I would say to anybody thinking about doing something like this to just do it, because it's been just such a highlight for me. And, I dreamed about it for so long, and it was even better than how I dreamt. Like, it just went so well.
So what are some of the positive fallouts from doing this so far? Like, is there anything kind of unexpected that's kind of come around your way from doing it?
Not really. A lot of, a huge thing for me was like the day after the race, just like opening up my social media and seeing how people were so supportive and so following it and so into it. That was just like amazing to me, and the messages, and I'm still like answering back some people that were messaging me, and I have so many like guys from Baja, like Mexican dudes, who have friended me, and I just feel more immersed in the Baja scene now, basically, which is a side effect, right? And I wish I could do this every year. Unfortunately, I don't have the pocketbook for that, but just some self-confidence, I would say that, being able to check this off the bucket list. Had I not finished, had I broke my arm on that initial crash or something, right? Like, where would I be right now? I'd be depressed. I'm telling you that right now. And I'd probably be trying to convince Kim to let me sign up for next year, right?
Just one more year. Just one more. That's it. Yeah.
But, the whole huge purpose of this is testing yourself, right?
Yeah.
And I didn't, and from that start line where I'm measuring up all the other guys and their bikes and their setups versus like myself and what I've done with the bike I have, and knowing that, I finished and so many of these other beasts didn't, right?
Right. So how many people entered the Ironman Pro?
13.
On bikes? 13. And
yeah.
how many finished?
6.
6.
Yeah.
You among those 6.
That's right.
It's amazing.
Yeah. Right on, man.
There was one on the app, I think I was telling you last time we talked, there was one guy, I could see he was at a resort. When you Google Earth where he was in the pool at that resort.
And I know who you're talking about, and it was one of the guys that I passed. He was taking a whiz.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah,
totally.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's like if you don't put a catheter on, you end up at the resort.
At a resort.
Exactly.
Yeah, sucks to be him.
Oh yeah, I brought some back for souvenirs for all of us.
Oh,
good.
Nice. Used or brand new?
Oh, it's funny because I had a used one from the pre-ride and I had put it in my backpack pocket. And Tim's like, "Oh, can I borrow your T handle or something?" And I'm like, "Yeah, here you go." And it was like the condom catheter, and he like almost grabbed it. And he's like, "You prick!" Oh yeah, it's hilarious. Lots of jokes came from the condom catheter.
I bet.
There's probably going to be a few more.
Oh yeah, there will. Yeah.
Excellent.
What before we do wrap it up, what was your favorite part of the whole experience? It doesn't even have to be the race. What was your favorite bit of the whole experience?
I mean, just being in the zone, like for me, like those times even when it was so late in the race, just holding it wide open kind of thing and sitting on, like a rutted out trail where there's like a hump that's like a foot or 18 inches wide. And I'm doing and it's silty itself, right?
Yep.
And if you get into either of those ruts, and I'm doing 50, 60 miles an hour on that little tiny space in between of disaster. Those moments, and
you felt like you were what you watched on TV.
Exactly. And it was everything that I thought it would be.
Cool.
And I was so into it alone in the middle of nowhere, just the sound of the bike, the smells, the dust.
Like, what a mental game.
Yeah, it was
to do
amazing.
that
Like
on
just
your own.
those highs and those moments were just so good.
John, again, we're doing a podcast here.
Oh, give me a break. Cool, man. Well, any other parting questions for the man here?
Just kind of blown away by the whole experience sitting here and listening. And
Oh, this has been great, boys, and I'd like to say, like, well done on the whole podcast thing. Period. I think.
Thank you.
Yeah.
It's not us that does a good job. We just know who to invite on the podcast.
That's correct. Yeah.
Really?
Yeah. We have a good guest list.
Yeah, we do.
Right on. Well,
Yeah,
for those
appreciate
that don't know, I've been part of the Valley Rally landscape since
Indeed.
its
Day one.
inception.
Yeah.
But it's really cool to see where you guys are pushing this thing and
Yeah.
the little branches off that you're doing. It's amazing, and I love it. It's great.
Yeah, thanks.
Thank you.
Well, likewise, man. I mean, I think and that's kind of one of the reasons why we're doing this is the scene. Like, we've been in it for some time, and it's progressing real nice now. And there's some cool folks doing some cool stuff.
Yep.
And I think having this as a place to concentrate all that awesomeness and have access for other folks that may not know about it. I think it's a great thing.
Yeah.
Hell yeah. And
Yeah.
with that, how about a little tequila shot, boys?
Let's do a tequila shot.
All right.
tequila shot.
Yes.
I haven't had lunch yet. Perfect.
Gotta have the taste in your mouth at least once on this thing here.
Yeah. Excellent idea.
Keep them reasonable for you there, John.
Oh yeah.
That you haven't had lunch. Okay, I'm gonna give you the sparkly one.
Oh. Yeah.
I'm a little pissed. I wanted the sparkling
This
one.
is 1800 Reposado, which is a
Well, if
good
you're
one.
If you're gonna drink tequila, that's probably one of the better ones.
Couldn't get the Don Julio. It was probably sold out Christmas time.
I
Right?
actually looked for that today.
Did you?
Yeah, I did.
Nice,
It was
yeah.
gone. But I was in Renfrew, Ontario, so.
Ooh, yeah.
Yeah.
Probably not much. Probably
They didn't
gets
even
up
have
there.
a sign for Don Julio, but
All right.
Cheers.
okay.
Cheers,
Cheers,
boys.
Darren. Congratulations.
Ew.
Oh. And with that, I think we're out.
Right
All
on.
right, peace. All right, good job, boys.